Hi guys and welcome back. What I'd like to do in this episode is get that gearbox back in, get the spring plates back in, get the gearbox back in, but there are some components that I do need to clean and paint before I do that, and also I've got that tool that I broke to repair, so let's get on with it. So here is a selection of parts that I wouldn't mind getting into that black paint that I've used on the floor pan. I've got the brake backing plates off there for the rear brakes. I've got these fellas here. They're just for the anti-roll bar links at the back. Rear bump stops and brackets. That's the little throttle pedal arm cover there, and the little cover on the back of the pan. Also the gearbox cradle where the mounts go there, that needs to be painted, and the upper and lower arms. So as you know, on this channel we still have a distinct lack of the correct tools. I'd just like to talk about these camber adjusters. These are kind of like a taper fit, and they're sometimes really difficult to take off. But that's okay, you can just put a puller on those edges there, on the center point, and even use a whizzy gun, and these will just crack off. But I don't have a puller, so not the right size anyway, so I couldn't do that. The other option is actually to, support it in a vise, and that actually, you can use this edge here, and you can hit it with a hammer, and it should just free itself off, but I don't actually have a vise either. The option that I had was to just put it on its side there, and I actually used it, rested it on a hammer head there, and then I just used a larger hammer. So with the camber nut face just sitting on the hammer head there, I was able to give it quite a few good old clouts with a bigger hammer, and that just popped off, and it was simple as that, which is great because that means I can then change the boot that goes over here, the dust cover. So I'm going to get on with these bits first, just so that they have enough time to dry overnight, so I can get them whacked back in tomorrow, hopefully. I'm going to address it the same way as I normally do. I'm just going to use wire brushes and whatever I've got, any type of abrasive, just to clean the grease and the dirt off them, thoroughly degrease these, mask up the areas that need to be masked, and then just blast them with a bit of the metal paint. So that whole process of cleaning the grime off these parts and keying them up, degreasing them, repeating, it took a lot longer than I expected. I was expecting a couple of hours, but it actually turned out to be double that. So a quick tip would be, if you do a lot of cleaning up grimy parts, is I actually squirrel away a lot of the old sandpaper that I use, and then I use them to do the grubby jobs, then it goes in the bin. Next thing I need to do is mask up the areas that I don't want paint on, and it includes inside some of these threads on the arm, around the ball joints, etc. And then I'm going to give them another panel wipe, and then we're ready for paint, finally. So I've just applied a light coat on these parts, and while they're drying and flashing off, I think I'll get on with repairing that tool. So the first thing I need to tackle is this area here. It's not quite at 90 degrees, which means that when it's actually bolted up here, it wasn't quite sitting correctly. I mean, I could easily cut and weld it here on the thread, but then I'd risk losing the strength in that area. So I think the best option is to actually cut this back here and then move this slightly down and then just weld up the area. So I've just loosely fitted this spring plate in position just so I can check this area up here, and yeah, it's sitting a lot nicer. So what I need to do is just weld up the cut, the incision that I've made up there, and then I'll just weld this broken piece back on, but hopefully this time a little bit stronger. So to give this area a little bit of extra strength, I've just drilled some holes there, so I'm going to plug weld those. Should help support this section here. And then what I've done is I've just linished these down at a slight angle, so I've got a little bit more area there to put a weld in. So I've just applied all 3 coats of paint on these bits. All I can do now is just let them dry. I'd just like to apologise for my voice today. I don't know what it is. I seem to have got some kind of lurgy today. It's not a problem with your audio. If it was a problem with your audio, like a voice changer,
it would probably sound like this.
So these are the new torsion bar bushes or spring plate bushes. They just kind of sit in there. Some people tend to just plop them in there and fit them dry, but I prefer just to put a tiny bit of grease around the outside on the inside there, because in the past I have had problems with these actually creaking, making squeaking noises. So the repair tool is actually working really well. I can just wind the handle up and move the spring plate up. But something that's going through my mind is how difficult it is actually to lift this up. I've got a sneaking suspicion that I need to just lower this one spline. I'm going to take that gamble and then I'll see what it sits like when the body's on and the engine's in. I may have to do some adjustment, but as I said before, I think that this vehicle has been raised at the rear. It doesn't feel right, so I'm just going to drop it down one spline on the back here, refit the spring plates, and if I need to adjust it, then hey, we'll adjust it then. So if you remember when I was taking this apart, I did actually mark this spring plate, and you can see there that's slightly off. That's actually off by one spline, which I'm thinking it could be the standard height. I mean, I'm not entirely sure. As I said before, I'm going to wait till it's all loaded up with the body and the engine, and then if I need to, I can easily just adjust this. So after using our special tool just to bring the spring plate up, I actually went just slightly higher than this stop here, and then I just hammered the side of the spring plate home to make it just sit on the stop, and that's about it. So sometimes these spring plate covers can be an absolute pain to fit. A lot of it's to do with the actual tension on this spring plate, which is moving the bush, which means that when you put the cover on, you can't quite align the bolt holes. And the answer is quite simple. Just use longer bolts just to line this plate up where you need it. In my case, I use one long bolt and I just use a G-clamp here, and then I could easily fit these ones in afterwards. So now that's all fitted, I just need to get on with the other side. So that's the gearbox slotted into place there, but I've kind of snookered myself because those painted parts aren't dry yet. And one of the parts that I need is this gearbox cradle here that I did actually prep and paint. But as well as that, I've got all the gubbins that fit across here and the backing plates as well. So there's not a huge amount I can do at this point. So I've got some other bits here as well. I've got gearbox mounts, but I can't fit those as that part's dry. And I've also got the dust covers for the ball joints. But yet again, I've painted the arms, so I can't even fit those. So these parts here and the arms up here are still a little bit tacky, and I don't want to run the risk of actually damaging them when I fit them, so I am actually going to let them cure for a couple of days. So when it comes to the metal paint, it is gloopy stuff, and I tend to thin it down quite a lot just so I can get a decent finish through the spray gun. But doing so, the curing time is actually extended, so it's probably best to leave it for, you know, a day or two just to make sure they're fully dry. So this was the new and improved Mark II version of my spring plate tool, which met an untimely death. It worked fine. It worked absolutely fine. I had to reinforce the welds down here and change this angle slightly at the top there. It wasn't quite at 90 degrees. And it worked. It worked absolutely fine. But if you are making one for yourself, what I'd recommend is using a high tensile steel threaded rod in there. This is just a stock bit of threaded bar, and to be honest, I feel that it could be a little bit stronger. So I don't want to waste time waiting for paint to dry, so I'm going to get on with stripping the paint off this roof, but you guys don't actually have to watch that. So unfortunately, the tiny little bits that I painted to degrease them and prep them up did take a lot longer than I anticipated, so I've kind of ran out of time. But anyway, gives us a lot of stuff to do in the next episode, and I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.
Cheers.